Just one moment. Mr. Chairman, you're live on YouTube.
Thank you, Ms. Talbot. Well, good afternoon, Corporations Committee for 21-22. Welcome to our first meeting of the year, even though it's virtual. We do have 4 bills before us this afternoon. To begin with, if Ms. Nord would please call the roll.
Representative Blackburn.
He's working on unmuting. He looks like he's here. We'll count him as a here.
Representative Clausen.
Here.
Representative Clifford.
Here.
Representative Duncan.
Oh, sorry, here.
Representative Ayer.
Here.
Representative Hunt.
Yep.
Representative McGuire. Excused.
Excused. He'll be late today.
Representative Roscoe.
Here.
And Chairman Zwanitzer.
Here.
Mr. Chairman, you have a quorum.
Thank you, Ms. Nord. And with that committee, I don't believe I'm anyone's first committee, so you've all gone through this process before. As you're well aware, not only are all members of corporation returning members, we also have redistricting. And so for those of you who missed the Management Council meeting, we are having an additional meeting in February as the Corporations Committee, but also the Redistricting Committee. So your Management Council has assigned the Joint Interim Corporations Committee to be the 2021 Redistricting Committee as well, which is exciting. And so throughout the next year interim, we will have specific redistricting meetings and specific interim corporations meetings, and we'll talk more about that as we move forward. But letting you know, in February, we will likely have at least 1 corporations meeting and 1 introductory redistricting meeting. And so if any of you have days in February, you know you're unavailable, please email me and let me know, and we will try to work around as best I can. With that today, committee, we're doing the bills actually in numerical order because I thought it would be nice to have kind of a long one, short one, long one, short one. With that, House Bill 13, alcoholic beverage regulation will be first up on our agenda today. As 5 of you are returning to this committee, I know you've sat through hours and hours of testimony regarding this bill, but if you would indulge the rest of us on making sure we're up to date. I'm looking right now to see if we have someone from the Liquor Division prepared to present the bill. It was, there we go. We're going to bring them in. So wait just a second for their camera to come up. Good afternoon, Wyoming Liquor Division.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman.
Do we want to start the camera?
That would be helpful. If you're ready. There you go.
All right.
And so I believe either Mr. Noble or Mr. Montoya will present the bill to the committee, but perhaps quickly, if you could go around the room and our camera, maybe starting with Mr. Montoya, and introduce yourselves for the new members of the committee so we know you all.
No problem, Mr. Chairman. I am Tom Montoya. I'm Chief of Enforcement for the Department of Revenue Liquor Division.
I'm Dan Noble. I'm the Director of the Department of Revenue.
Nicole Novotny-Smith, Administrator of the Liquor Division.
Mike Mosier, Wyoming State Liquor Association, representing the retailers.
Nice. And so I know at least 3 of you have worked diligently on this bill throughout the entire interim. And perhaps my late congratulations to Ms. Novotny-Smith for becoming the new Liquor Division Administrator. I guess it's been several months now, so I'm sure she has that roll down pat. But committee, we're going to run through House Bill 13. Perhaps Mr. Montoya, if you could give us the 5-minute cursory overview of the changes and how they may affect the Wyoming Liquor Division.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, committee, for your time. You're absolutely correct. We've spent a lot of time. In fact, we actually started this process about 2 years ago. In 2017, we did a rather large revisions bill, and this is really kind of a continuation of that. It got a little bit longer during the interim because of COVID. At that time, Chairman Lindholm asked that we also add some business-friendly stuff to this bill. And it was actually 2 bills to begin with, and then the committee decided that they would go ahead and combine the 2 bills. And with that, if you would like, I can go through it page by page, basically, and go through it fairly quick.
That would be great if you would. There are 4 new members of the committee, at least for this term. I think 3 of us are returning from former years, but a refresher would be nice.
No problem, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. The first 11 pages really is 1/3 of the bill. And basically what that is we're just pulling apart microbreweries and wineries because in current law, they're intermingled under Wyoming Statute 124412. And it's been incredibly confusing for microbreweries and wineries across the state, not to mention our staff who is always in it. Because they end up having to do a bunch of federal licensing as well. And so all we're doing, we're not changing the law, we're just pulling them apart. So basically you'll see in the repealers when we get to that, 124412 is being repealed. 12414 is winery law. And then starting on page 7 is 12415. And that's going to be microbrewery law. And that runs through page 11, about the middle of the page on line 9. Then we get to this is part of the COVID response is delivery. Delivery has been allowed in Wyoming since the 1960s, 62 as a matter of fact, under AG opinions, and it was confirmed back in the 80s as well. And so basically we're just codifying it into statute because that came up during COVID. So many people wanted to be able to do delivery. So page 11, page 12. Will be the delivery statute, and it also will clarify sealed container. And basically, all over the state of Wyoming, just about in every town, you'll see liquor stores that have sloshies or slushies, whatever you want to call them, frozen margaritas, daiquiris, that kind of stuff. And so they've always asked for something as far as clarification as containers. As a matter of fact, we even have one of the containers here. And basically what it is you put a mixed drink in there, whatever that may be, and the first time you put the cap on, it seals it, okay? And so that when the first time you open it, you actually break a seal, just like a milk jug at home. And basically that we're doing is just clarifying that. We had a lot of cities asking us to do this just because they feel more comfortable putting something in municipal code if they've got a state statute to bear on that with. So, and that's really why we did that. Any questions so far? No? Okay, great. We get into page 14. And basically, again, we're not changing anything here. We're just clarifying on line 8. It had the incorrect name, and so we just corrected the name in statute to 24-hour. They just had malt beverage permit, but it's the 24-hour malt beverage permit in statute. And then what we did from 13 clear to page 15, line 13, we just listed the licenses that are already in statute. They've been in statute, but we've had many questions from attorneys over the years asking, saying, well, it's not really licensed because it's not in the definition. Well, it's in statute, but we're just clarifying this and we're just putting those in statute. When we get to the bottom of page 15, that's a restaurant, and basically what that is doing is removing some archaic restrictions as far as who can qualify for a restaurant and what it takes to be a restaurant. Basically, local licensing authorities can really determine that. The change of the restaurant scenes over the years has really changed. You can buy hamburgers now that would cost more than a good steak dinner. We have tapas restaurants, and so they're always scrambling to be able to qualify for a restaurant license. This way, this will give local licensing authorities the ability, if they want this restaurant, they can determine whether or not they qualify within their home jurisdictions. if we drop down to line 13, industry rep licenses, okay, there's some cleanup language there. But basically, when you get down to 23, what we're doing there is we're taking away the requirement for industry reps. These are the brokers. These are the people that go from retailer to retail outlet, and they will do the selling of wines and spirits. One of the requirements that's been in statute forever is they had to be domiciled in Wyoming. After the 2 Supreme Court cases, Granholm v. Hild in the Tennessee v. Thomas case, they basically, the Attorney General's office suggested this particular insertion be put in there because we could open ourselves up for lawsuit. And I know this is something that Director Noble had been looking at for a number of years anyway. So it just takes the requirement away to be domiciled in Wyoming. So a broker can be from Idaho or Montana, Colorado, and work in this state as well, as long as they're licensed. We didn't take away the licensing requirement. Then on page 18, we get into line 3 through 7. And basically what that does is allow distilleries, wineries, microbrewery owners, these are Wyoming businesses, allows the owners to go out and rep their own products. There's a federal and state tied house laws that said that industry reps, and industry rep is defined as a manufacturer, distiller, a wholesaler, an agent, whatever that may be, and they can't be associated with this. But it's kind of dumb that if you own a winery or a distillery in Wyoming, that you can't go and promote your own products. And so what this does is just allow them to promote their own products. We drop down to line 17 on page 18. This is something that Chairman Lindholm wanted to do, and that was to raise the amount of wine that could come through the direct ship program. It went on this bill, it goes from 36 liters to 108, and that's 4 cases is 36 liters. That's 4 cases of 12 750 ml bottles to 12 cases. And that's all that does. When you get to page 19 on the bottom there on line 21, that is just to clear up some confusing language. This is under the authorities of cities and towns being able to issue or not issue liquor licenses within their jurisdictions. It's up to them. But just that word retail was given them thinking it's just that one licenses, but really they issue a number of licenses. So that's just a language clarification. Page 20, if you in the middle there on line 12, that's just LSO cleanup of language because of other things we're doing in this bill. If you get down to line 22 on page 20, this eliminates the requirement for local licensing authorities to actually have to place a notice on the building of a renewal or transfer. This one, they're going to love. As a matter of fact, I had 2 phone calls just this morning. It's renewal time for about a third of the licensees in the state of Wyoming. And I've had 3 of them ask me, well, with this bill, do I still have to? I said, yeah, it's not law yet. So. Page 22 is the next change. Again, that's just cleanup from 2017. That was actually part of Senate File 43 when we took out the preferential right. For some reason, we just forgot to take this out, and it got by LSO and the AG's office and our staff. So this is just finishing Senate File 43 cleanup, just taking out that last few words there. When we get to page 23, this will eliminate on page or line 13. This eliminates the 5-mile restrictions for county malt beverage permits. Again, this is part of that business friendly that we were asked to do. Under current law, boards, county commissioners can only issue license. These are county malt beverage permits, and these are both for on and off premise. But you have to be 5 miles outside of an incorporated city or town. This will bring a lot of businesses into that will be able to qualify this, like racetracks, campgrounds, rodeo arenas, bait shops, those kinds of stuff, and they'll be able to have be able to sell beer. On line 14, starting on line 16. What that does is, because we're upping the amount of wine that can be direct shipped by an out-of-state shipper, we are putting the in-state retailers on the same footing, so that they'll be able to ship the same amount of quantities that out-of-state shippers can. And again, that is because we have to be in compliance with those two Supreme Court cases, Granholm and the Tennessee case. On 24, on line 16, again, that's just a renumbering because of changes that we're making. On 25, at the very top on line 1, same thing. That's just LSO cleanup of language for consistency. Starting on line 11, this eliminates the restriction of transferring a resort liquor license. And to be honest with you, we're not even sure why that was in statute. You know, I don't know that anybody would transfer a ski hill to qualify or something like that. So it's really a law that's not needed. And there is no restrictions on the number of resort liquor licenses. So it's just do away with it. On page 26, line 6, the word liquor was inserted only because that's what's in the definition. Before I just read alcoholic and malt beverage, but it's really alcoholic liquors is how it's referred to in 12.1.101 under the definitions. And now alcoholic liquors are defined as spirits and wines for these purposes. And then, of course, this is something, the rest of that page and into the first part of page 27. During 2017 in the big revisions bill, we promised this committee that we would actually come back with something that would do away with the definition of room. We eliminated it in 2017 in that revisions bill, and we did so that room was no longer required. If you remember the big conversations where a stick here and a stick here, well, restaurant liquor license rooms were completely different because the restrictions on a restaurant license. So we told them that we would come back with something at a later date. This is it. This just removes the room requirement and allows local licensing authorities to designate a designated area. So liquor agents won't be going in there and say, you got to build this and you got to put these poles in and this wall up. They won't do that. It's strictly up to the local authorities what they'll be doing. Starting on line 8 on page 27, this just eliminates archaic restrictions for restaurant licenses as well. Basically what that said that, you know, that a restaurant that had a liquor license couldn't do certain functions like have receptions or couldn't have music in there or those types of things. But, you know, that's pretty old. There's restaurants that if they want to have a small wedding reception or, you know, have a 3-piece jazz band playing while dinner's going, that's up to the local licensing authorities. So that just removes just archaic requirements. On the bottom of 27, this eliminates the restriction that a county must charge the same fee for a restaurant license as a city if they're within that 5-mile zone. So let the Board of County Commissioners decide. I know that Senior Agent Hunt and I were looking just this morning to see how many licensees that would affect. And we couldn't come up with more than maybe 2 or 3. So it's really something that doesn't need to be in there, and let the county, it's a county license, let the county commissioners decide what they want to charge. We get to page 28, line 14. This eliminates the ability of someone opening a temporary bar on a 1-day permit. This has been tried, actually. It was tried here in Cheyenne. Somebody wanted to get 10 1-day malt beverage permits and open a bar during Frontier Days. Once the city found out exactly what they were doing, they ended up revoking those permits from them. You know, you'll see later on in this bill, we're kind of opening them up a little bit to give the authorities more flexibility, local licensing authorities more flexibility, but we just wanted to make sure they weren't abused. And that's why we put that language in there. Same thing for the catering permits there on the bottom on line 28, starting on line 22. Those just said the catering permit could only be issued for those kinds of events. And we just decided we'll let local licensing authorities decide what type of events because there could be a multitude of events that they wanted. It's up to the locals decide you know, what they want to issue those licenses for. Next page on line 8 on page 29. Same thing for the catering permits that we did for the malt beverage permits. They just can't be used to open up a temporary bar during a special event like Cheyenne Frontier Days or Jackson Rodeo Days or whatever it may be. Line 16 on page 29. This is just something that is no longer needed. Just our archaic language because of 12.4.504. What this does is eliminate some of the requirements for these permits to be issued, these one-day permits, because of actually 2 permits now. During the 2017 revisions bill, one of the things we were trying to do is we were trying to get rid of 12.4.504 because in 30 years, nobody had ever used that. That's the event center and civic center bill. But actually it was WHAM that wanted that saved, but with all the qualifiers removed and allowed them to be able to do that. And we strengthened that language on the next page. But now, like University of Wyoming here that we're going to be taken out of at the big facility there, if they were to have 25 permits over a year, they could be spending $2,500. Now they could get 1 permit, be licensed for $365 for maybe $500. So it's just a better option for them. And for rodeo grounds, if you remember, was it last year, the rodeo bill? So rodeos now can do that with the new rodeo bill that was passed. And so really this is no longer needed. On page 30, that's what I was just talking about there, starting on line 8. It just gives a little bit more guidance for local licensing authorities that they can specify the time, the fees, and it goes on to say that, they'll implement their own rules and stuff for these one-day permits. Or I mean, for this special malt beverage permit at the auditoriums and civic centers. On 12.4.603 on line 18 of this bill, that's just cleanup because of the changes that we're making under 12.4.201. And that goes through to the top of page 31. On line 8, that's just cleanup from the renumbering. 12.5.201, what we did there is there was a number of licenses, golf clubs, restaurants, retail, resort licenses, and they could all do the same thing, but they all had their separate component in 12.5.201. So, we said, why don't we just clean it up? Because they can all do the same exact thing. We'll just put it into one, and then we can put some more into repealers and just make it simpler to read. The next thing is going to be on page 32, down on line 20. This is, again, a cleanup due to the separation of microbrewery and winery law. Page 33 is retail businesses there on line 8. This was LSO cleanup because of the changes that we're making. And then on page 34, beginning on line 1, striking those 2 words and bring the stuff. This is just clarification of language. That's all that does. When we changed and did away with rooms in 2017, we used that word "an establishment," but we had so many, especially big box grocery stores, calling us saying, well, our attorneys are reading this, that if it's an establishment, they can't even come into the grocery store. And that was not the intent of that bill. It was just the designated area that they have to put for their package sales. So this just cleans up that language to make.
Did Mr. Montoya freeze? We'll give it a second for the Wyoming Liquor Division to come back online. As some of you may know, we have 70-mile-per-hour winds today in Cheyenne, and the Liquor Division is out in the far east side of the county here, or east side of Cheyenne in the county, where it can get really windy. Mr. Mosier in Liquor Division, are you back? We can see you now. I think you guys cut out their liquor division for about 2 minutes. We were on page, we were just finishing up page 34.
Well, that's about
And
it.
for the record, Mr. Chairman, I didn't touch nothing. Page 34 is real simple. At the beginning was on line 1, we are just striking an establishment. That was part of the fix in 2017 for packaged liquors, like in big box stores, especially grocery stores, that type of thing. But too many corporate attorneys were calling here saying, well, we read it that, you know, minors aren't even allowed in the store because the entire building is an establishment. That was only really meant for the dispensing area that's been designated by the licensing authority. So we just cleaned that language up. And we also put in the definition of dispense in there just so that they understand what we're talking about. Now, the rest would be the repealers, and I can go through those fairly quick there, Mr. Chairman. 12.2.201G, Romanet I, Romanet II. This is a license for microbrewery to sell products to a malt beverage wholesaler, no longer needed. There are currently 2 licenses available. One just allowed a microbrewery to sell to a wholesaler so they can distribute their products. And microbreweries can also be issued a wholesaler license, which also allows them to sell to another wholesaler. So it was a redundant license. We're just getting rid of one just to make it simpler. 12.5.201 through 12.2.501 through 12.2.505. This is keg tag registration. We had a lengthy discussion with this with the committee. This has been around since 2006. It was actually House Bill 144 in 2006, became effective January 1 of 07. And as far as I know, there's never been law enforcement asking for any information from a keg tag. But, you know, however, I will say this, that retailers will always be recording this information anyway. It's not like this information is going to go away. And they do that for keg deposits. So they're still going to have all the information that's required if law enforcement wants to go in there. The only difference is it's not going to have a red tag on the keg itself, and it saves the liquor division about $10,000 a year. 12.4.102, A, Romanet 7. Zoning information on the application. We've never used it in I don't know, probably since 1935. Just something that's not needed on the application itself. 12.4.103 B through D. This is issuance of license to no more than one person. You know, under current law, it says that person, and that person is defined in statute, which is an individual, partnership, limited liability, corporation. Okay, no licensing authority can issue to more than one person, but in Wyoming, it's extremely easy and inexpensive to form another LLC or corporations, and many of them have. So we just decided, you know what, there's such an easy workaround. Let's do that. Let local licensing authorities decide who they want to have licenses in their jurisdiction. 12.4.201G, this is the license fee for a county license, must be the same as a town. We explained that earlier. This just removes that statute. 12.4.407D, it's an old grandfather clause, no longer needed. It just said that if you held a club license, you could transfer it to a restaurant license. That hasn't been used in, I don't know, 40, 50 years. 12.4.409 prohibits the transfer of location for restaurant liquor licenses. That's no longer needed because restaurant licenses in 2015 became unlimited. And so no need for that statute. 12.4.410F removes the definition of room for restaurant liquor licenses. Local licensing authorities will decide on the designated area. 12.4.412, current law for winery and microbrewery, that's going to eliminate. So we created 12.4.14 and 12.4.415 to pull apart those two. 12.4.505A and B is the malt beverage permit for state fair. Again, it's no longer needed. They can use one of those civic center ones, or they could even use the rodeo, because I know that they got rodeo grounds out there. But instead of a license only be good for, you know, a week, 10 days, whatever that length of time is, now they can get it year round, and they can have fundraisers year round, probably for less of a fee. 12.4.602C. Removes the restrictions that a county license cannot be transferred for 6 years if it was part of an annexation. So basically, if a license that is really a county license, but a town grows and they annexate into the city, that they can move to wherever they want. Before, it was held for 6 years, and that was really tough to track that, especially for the cities. 124603B, same as above for retail and malt beverage permit, redundant, not needed. Again, again for retail and malt beverage permits. And then 125201G through J, that's those redundant statutes that I was telling you about. Then now it's just incorporated into one paragraph instead of all these other paragraphs. It just eliminates several paragraphs within statute. And that's it, Mr. Chairman. That's the bill. We happy to stand for questions.
You can catch a breath now.
Very good explanation, Mr. Montoya. I do have one question back on page 20 with that signage requirement to renew your license. Do we just believe that's outdated, or the original purpose of that signage was so bar patrons could complain?
Mr. Chairman, that's absolutely correct. And you're right, it is outdated because now cities and counties have websites and they can advertise it. And so that's the reason for that. Plus, they still have to do the notice in the paper as well.
Okay. And I'd also like to welcome Representative McGuire to the committee. If anybody has any questions, just raise your hand and I will scroll through boxes real quick. I'm not seeing any questions right now. Mr. Montoya, Mr. Noble, anything to add while we have the director?
Mr. Chairman, Dan Noble, Director of the Department of Revenue. I think probably the only thing I will say, and this is at the even higher than 30,000 foot level, is that this is actually, I'd call it a modernization bill. We're actually kind of modernizing our statutes to kind of recognize how commerce has changed over the years and try to stay in compliance with some of the federal law that's been out there over the years. There are still federal requirements associated with this, and we want to make sure that we still align with those. I think we've accomplished that. These guys did an awful lot of work on this, and I think it's a good bill. I think it does the things that we really wanted it to, and that is to basically modernize the liquor division statutes.
Okay. Ms. Novotny Smith, while you're there as part of the state, any other comments?
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm a whopping 4 months into this job, but loving every minute of it. And, agree and echo the aforementioned comments, and will add that it is really important and critical to the department and the division that we acknowledge county and local control and their important roles in this in terms of each city, community, municipality, county getting to decide what's best for them. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Any questions in the committee for any of the state agencies before I turn it over to the government affairs representatives? Representative Roscoe, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I just have a question for Mr. Montoya about how many notifications in the newspapers that they have to give up, because there's going to be several other bills that have been sort of modernizing their departments, trying to reduce the amount of newspaper notifications. And I was just wondering what it cost the Liquor Association to have newspaper notifications. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Sure. Mr. Montoya.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Roscoe, great question. Now they have to advertise for 2 consecutive weeks prior to the hearing. That was changed 4 or 5 years ago. It used to be 4, but they updated that information I think for all these different kinds of licenses. Cities and counties have to do a lot of different kind of notifications, and so they changed to 2.
Okay. Any further questions from the committee? Seeing none at this time, I see that Representative Duncan, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a follow-up to Representative Roscoe's question. So the changes that we have coming from this committee about the same issue, about the notifications of municipalities for their notices, it was mainly I think it was their minutes and one other, I think, particular thing that they have to publish. Will this affect, if we pass that other bill, will it affect this? Do we need to address this while we have it? Or is it completely separate animal?
Mr. Montoya or Mr. Noble, go ahead.
Chairman, Representative Duncan, this will not affect that, because what this is under current law, a licensing authority, city clerk or county clerk, has to actually go and tape a piece of paper to a door. And that's really what that does. And so all we're doing is eliminating that, because they can now advertise it on their website.
Okay.
Meet public notice.
Yeah, that doesn't change.
Seeing no more questions at this time, just so members of the public are aware, in the committee, the Wyoming Liquor Division is the state agency. The Wyoming State Liquor Association is made up of the licensees who have liquor licenses throughout the state, and their government affairs representative, Mr. Mosier, was nice enough to hang out in one of our state buildings today and drive there. So Mr. Mosier, any comments on this bill you'd like to share?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have just a couple quick points. And to add on to your clarification, the reason why we've done this is because we'd be sitting on a table in front of you anyway. The committee has asked, as they did in 2017, that we work together for those clarifications. But as a caveat, I'm a lobbyist. These guys are actually credible. So take that for what you can. I've been asked if the liquor division and us always agree. We do not. However, we make sure by the time we're in front of you guys that we do. And so we've worked very hard on this, and I salute the Department of Revenue Liquor Division and the Department of Revenue in general for all the work on this. I refer to it as a cleanup. This bill is not controversial. As members of the committee will remember, if there's been any controversy in any of the issues, we've either changed it or deleted it. This is a bill that is clean, and it helps everybody. Everybody from the municipalities to the retailers, et cetera, like it. There is a place for controversial liquor issues. However, I pray this is not the bill, because we just want it to stay making no harm to anybody involved. Two quick points, if I may, Mr. Chairman. There's been a few misconceptions. One of them Mr. Montoya brought out. There's been thoughts that somehow this creates new liquor licenses, and it does not. All it does, and I think it's because of pages 14 and 15 where we list the liquor licenses in the definitions, all it does is it puts those under the definitions. This bill actually reduces the number of types of liquor licenses rather than expand it. Also, the last issue, Mr. Chairman, and this is sometimes an area of confusion, is the difference between DTC, direct to consumer sales of spirits, versus delivery. We are addressing delivery in this bill. With delivery, you have to be a full retail licensee. And it, as Mr. Montoya said, since the 60s, it's been legal, although it's kind of funny because the AG opinion in the 60s was just addressing payment by Western Union. And then the one in the 80s, we actually knew what credit cards were, and it dealt with that. This bill is actually helping delivery because we didn't have any sideboards before that said, if you're going to do delivery, you got to do this and this and this. And so what we decided to do, especially with the pandemic, to make it safer to do delivery, is put sideboards up. There were a few towns, I know one of them that I'm sitting in right now, actually banned delivery of alcohol and changed that last year due to the pandemic. I know of nobody who, well, I don't know how many people ban it now, but it's been generally accepted by the state, by municipalities, by counties, through those AG opinions. The delivery is legal. We just felt it needed tightened up. The difference between delivery and direct to consumer, DTC, which is only allowed in the cases of wine, is to do delivery. Law enforcement can do compliance checks on you. You have to be insured. You have to train your people if the municipality or county requires it. You have to be licensed with the state, well, and with the local licensing authority, more importantly. And so you have accountability. With DTC, direct to consumer, you're then relying on delivery drivers, common carrier delivery drivers. This is connected directly to the retail establishment, and they have to answer if they goof anything up to law enforcement. There will be an amendment. I believe Mr. Pickard has a short amendment to the delivery language that I think help clarifies that confusion, that common carriers aren't involved, that this is a delivery from the retail store to its customers. The sales must take place in the building. They cannot take place at the site of destination. They have to be 21, all the sideboards you see. And so any concern about this opening any floodgates, this bill doesn't open any floodgates. It actually tightens up on stuff. And we support that, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, because we represent an industry that likes being regulated. Our product is a happy product, I think, but it can cause great damage if misused. And so we felt, especially with the deliveries, we needed to tighten up a little bit on that. And so with that, Mr. Chairman, bear in mind with delivery, a city can ban it, they can restrict it further. That's within their power. But at least we've got some state statutes, sideboards for it. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I think that's about as brief as I ever get, Mr. Chairman. So I will stop there and take any questions as needed.
All right, questions for the Wyoming State Liquor Association from the committee? I'm not seeing any currently. Thank you very much, Mr. Mosier. I know we do have several people wishing to testify on this bill before us. If you would raise your hand, if you're currently in the attendee lobby, and I will bring you in order. It looks like Mr. McLaurin and then Ms. Little will come in after that. So committee, please welcome Mr. McLaurin from WHAM.
Good morning, good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Thanks very much for the opportunity to comment on this. We like the bill a lot. We think it's timely, and Mr. Montoya and Tom Mosier deserve a lot of credit for the detail that went into this, and so we really support it. Thank you very much.
Easy enough. Any questions for the Wyoming Association of Municipalities? Not seeing any. Thank you very much, Mr. McLaurin. Have a great rest of your Wednesday.
Thank you.
Okay. We're going to bring in Miss Little, who should be joining us momentarily. There she is. Hi,
Mr.
Kelly.
Chairman, good
Welcome.
afternoon. Thank you, Chairman Zwanitzer and members of the committee. My name is Kelly Little. I'm with the Wyoming County Commissioners Association. The WCCA has taken a position of support on this bill. We appreciate that this bill will allow for increased flexibility and creativity for local businesses. This bill creates consistent local jurisdictional policy throughout statute and local control over licensing decisions, which the WCCA obviously supports, and we appreciate the acknowledgement of that in the testimony today. This bill also has the possibility of additional income through business opportunity and growth. The revenue doesn't necessarily accrue to the counties, but may help with the state budget situation. That's all I have today, Mr. Chairman. I would be happy to take any questions.
All right, questions for the County Commissioners Association. It's always nice when them and WHAM are on the same page and agree on a bill for us, from what I remember in corporations from my previous 12 years.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Not seeing any, Ms. Little, so thank you for being with us and enjoy the rest of your day.
Appreciate it.
Next up, committee, will be Mr. Pickard, who's joining us. There he is. Welcome, Dave.
Yes, good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for the opportunity to be with you this afternoon. Members of the committee, my name is Dave Pickard. I'm representing Southern Glazers Wine and Spirits and Republic National Distributing Company. As you know, in the interim, we've provided testimony and support the direction of this legislation is headed in and do support it. We have just a simple amendment, Mr. Chairman. I believe that you have that amendment.
And I have passed it out to the committee as well, Mr. Pickard. Committee, you got it, your email 10 minutes ago.
I appreciate that, Mr. Chairman. Members, this is just very simply, as Mr. Mosier had mentioned, tightening up again that delivery portion of this legislation. What we found in our review of House Bill 13 is that during the interim, you had two bills, as was mentioned earlier, and in LSO draft 181, this sentence was included in that delivery bill. And for reasons that are unknown to me, it was removed. And I spoke with Mr. Montoya and Mr. Mosier yesterday, and you, Mr. Chairman, and we would just feel a lot more comfortable protecting the three-tier system by reinserting that language. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to try and answer any questions.
Committee, any questions for Mr. Pickard? I'm not seeing at this time, Mr. Pickard. So after public comment, we will move the amendment at the appropriate time. And if you wouldn't mind hanging out in the waiting room, if there are questions, we'll bring you back in at that point.
Happy to do so. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next up will be Ms. Grott. And I believe no one else in the waiting room after Laura is wanting to testify on this bill. But if you are in the waiting room wanting to testify on House Bill 13, please raise your hand. With that, hi, Laura. Welcome to
Hi.
Corporations.
Hi, thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I'm Laura Grott with the Wyoming Beer Distributors Association. I just wanted to say that the malt beverage wholesalers stand in support of this bill and thank Mr. Mosier and the division, Dan and Tom, for all of their work. And like Mr. Mosier said, it's not meant to be controversial. Any problems we had, those amendments have been taken out, so we stand in favor of the bill.
And Ms. Grott, have you seen the amendment that Mr. Pickard is bringing forward on the common
No.
carrier language? Okay.
I will go in and look at it. Is it on the website?
I do not believe it is, but I will email it to you right now.
Thank you.
Yep. It should be in inbox shortly. And if you do have any comments on it, please raise your hand. I'll bring you back in.
Will do. Thank you.
Thank you. No questions, committee, for Ms. Grott? Not seeing any. All right. With that, committee, I believe that's all the public comment that I have signed up. Any other comments from the Liquor Division regarding any of the public comment? Not seeing any. So with that, let me close public comment. And is there a motion on the bill?
Move the
Move
bill.
the bill, Mr. Chair.
Going to say moved by Representative Blackburn, seconded by Representative Hunt. The bill is now on the table. Any discussion, committee? Or amendments the committee would like to move? As a chairman, I can't move an amendment, but I would remind people there is one out there if anyone else would like to move it. Representative Blackburn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to move the Pickard Amendment on page 13, line 7. We have a copy of that. I'd like to insert that into 13.7 or 13.6.
Got it. Is there a second? Seconded by Representative Duncan. Apparently, we cannot allow Uber or DoorDash to go pick up liquor for the common man and deliver it like they can for restaurant food. Discussion on that amendment, committee. Not seeing any. Oh, did I thought I saw a hand in the lobby, but it went away. Mr. Pickard would like to come back in and quickly mention why. So let's bring him back in real quick. I'm going to give it about 3 seconds. There you are. Mr. Pickard, did you have your hand raised?
I did, Mr. Chairman. I thank you for the opportunity to take a second bite at this.
Sure.
Your comment about Uber and Uber Eats, that's not what the intent of this language is. Under the statute as it's being drafted, those retail licensees can contract with a third party. What we're simply doing in this bill is prohibiting common carriers, FedEx, UPS, DHL, et cetera, which would then go down that slippery slope that was discussed about shipping and DTC. So not trying to limit any of the activities within the, what is currently going on out there and how delivery is taking place. Appreciate the opportunity to clarify that.
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Pickard. I'll try not to be so flippant in my fun comments from here on. I'm back to corporations, and those of you with me on revenue, to keep it lighthearted, I throw in lots of public commentary sometimes. All right, with that committee, further discussion on the bill before us, amendments, thoughts
Question on the amendment?
on the amendment. All those in favor of the amendment, please raise your hand into the camera. We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. All those opposed, please raise your hand. I got 0, so that amendment has passed. We are back on the bill. Is there further discussion or amendments on House Bill 13?
Question on the bill?
Seeing no further discussion or amendments, and knowing 6 of you spent an inordinate amount of time throughout the entire interim on this bill, with that, Ms. Nord, if you would call the roll on House Bill 13.
Mr. Chairman, this is a roll call vote for House Bill 13, alcoholic beverage regulation as amended. Representative Blackburn,
Aye.
Representative Clausen,
Aye.
Representative Clifford,
Aye.
Representative Duncan,
Aye.
Representative Ayer,
Aye.
Representative Hunt,
Aye.
Representative McGuire,
Aye.
Representative Roscoe,
Aye.
Chairman Zwanitzer.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, that bill passes unanimously.
Excellent. It's a good start to the committee. Because I am new as a chairman again to this committee and was not on the bill in the interim, if anyone else would like to floor manage this piece of legislation, I know Representative Duncan has brought alcohol bills in the past. I would give her first shot if she wants it to floor manage. I'm not sure what your minerals commitment are, Vice Chair, but would you like to floor manage House Bill 13 as well?
Sure. I have a couple coming, so that's
Okay.
fine. They'll all be lumped in together.
I like it. Well, thank you. So Representative Duncan will floor manage the bill, and if you have any comments or thoughts, I'm sure you can contact Mr. Noble, Liquor Division, at your convenience here, and any questions, let me know as well, and I'll try to back you up. With that committee, 1 down, 3 to go. Our next bill for consideration before we'll take a break is House Bill number 15, Department of Transportation Communication Facilities. Let me pull in Director General Reiner. And I did not talk to the YDOT director, but I'm hoping he is comfortable with presenting the bill. I assume that be correct, committee, in the interim. Was this brought by the Wyoming Department of Transportation? Okay. Director Reiner, welcome to Corporations.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. We'll look forward to talking about this bill with you. Yeah, for the record, my name's Luke Reiner, and I'm the director of YDOT. With me today is Mr. Troy Babbitt, and he's our director of comms and technology. So, Mr. Chairman, I think with your permission, maybe I'll give you a little history and then walk through the bill.
Great.
So, because I suspect here's the history of the bill. It really came out of the broadband task force. And the original concept was of expanding the WyoLink system, which is our system of towers for the communication system we use, using CARES Act funding. And so the original concept was about 17 new towers, which was our estimate of what it would take to fill out the entire WyoLink system. And we actually did submit a CARES Act request for that money. It was not approved for various reasons, but in that process of talking about CARES Act and WyoLink towers, the discussion of really the mechanics of how YDOT would support the broadband initiative with our towers was had. And that's really what started leading towards the bill that you see in front of you. Because certainly the concept was that YDOT would support the broadband initiative by using our technology and really hanging other people's technology and communication devices on our towers. So what I tell you, in terms of the short story, is that certainly YDOT and our technology division headed up by Mr. Babbitt recognizes the focus of the state and the focus in terms of broadband, and that focus being, hey, listen, we want to expand it. We want to get it out as far as we can to the hinterlands. And certainly we support that initiative and welcome the opportunity to participate in that. As we work through the broadband task force, the bill that you have in front of you today was actually part of a larger bill at one point, and then it was broken up into smaller bills. And then this one actually went through a lot of iterations. And what you see before is the final one. And it really settled on simplicity, which was a good news story, I think, for all of us in terms of the final result. And based on that, then let me just walk you through the bill, because really what it says is, hey, here's what we're going to set in really as the limits and the conditions for how YDOT uses its communication assets to support broadband expansion in the state of Wyoming. And so if you flip over to really page 2, and you see a bunch of stuff crossed off, which would give you a flavor of what was there before. But probably the first word that I'd point out to you on line 5 is the may. So the Wyoming Department of Transportation may lease excess capacity. That we went back and forth between may and shall, but there's a lot of issues with shall based on sort of current contract law and competition clauses and space available. And so in the end, we settled on may, with the assurance that, hey, listen, we will work to get this thing done. In fact, we actually have 2 telecommunication companies that we've contracted with right now to do this. So then you slip down to line 6. You see the addition of state-funded communication infrastructure. The state-funded there was key and essential, because today we have 93 WyoLink towers either built or in the final phases of completion. 16 or 1/6 of those we built with federal money, meaning that we are not authorized to lease space on those. And so the ones that are available are 77, and they're the ones that we funded with state money. And again, happy to put other communication assets on those towers. Now, in terms of sort of as you keep going down, really you get down to line 21 after all the cross off, which all had to do about rates, and I'll talk to you a little bit about that here in a second. But line 21 starts with all monies received from any lease executed shall be deposited into, it used to say the state general fund. Now it says the WyoLink tower maintenance account, and which is created by this bill. And then our task is to use the fees that would be collected from this process to help maintain the WyoLink towers, which is actually very helpful to us, because I think most of you have been tracking sort of the issues with funding WyoLink. Now, this will not certainly fund all of the tower maintenance for those WyoLink towers, but it all helps. In terms of really what the revenue would look like, I suspect that's probably one of the questions that you'd be interested in. Here's some rough numbers for you. And I think you see the fiscal notes about $3,500. So it's not a lot of revenue. But as we start out, there's about 77 towers there is 77 towers that are state funded that we could use. We estimate that a little bit less than 20% would actually work to support this initiative. And that's based on space available on the tower, because they were built really to accommodate WyoLink stuff and not a bunch of extra. And so it's just space available and the ability to even them support the extra weight that would be hanging on them. And then there's obviously some location issues where some locations would be inappropriate and not work for this. Then of those, which we've shared the location of all those with the telecommunication community. I don't know exactly, how many they might use, but let's say the estimate is 10, or, somewhere between 5 and 10. What we have sort of worked out is that based on the sort of guidance, the guidance from the state in terms of, hey, we want you to support this. Right now, sort of the lease rates where we're at is between 4 and 10% of the anticipated gross revenue that a provider would expect to earn from the site. So that's really sort of the negotiation that we've entered into. I think it was markedly significantly higher, but our goal is to project that out to the state, and this is our way to participate. We also, as I said, 2 are currently in place. We do certainly seek a 10-year lease, so we don't have a bunch of changes on those, and so that there's some consistent revenue there. And that's really, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, the bill in a nutshell. We certainly support it. I think it supports the strategic objectives of the state in terms of broadband expansion. With your permission, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to turn it over to Mr. Babbitt and see if he has any additional comments that he'd like to make.
Sure, go ahead, Mr. Babbitt. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Troy Babbitt, Chief Technology Officer at WYDOT. Again, everything that the director said is right on the money. We have been working with service providers in the past on this. We have a great working relationship. We do look forward to the expansion of rural broadband out there for Wyoming residents. The majority of these sites are in very, very either mountaintop regions, very rural locations. That's why, in fact, that you probably don't. It's not a big money maker for WYDOT. It in fact could pick up some of those rural locations. And then the flip side, it could be a win for us as well in working with those service providers to have us a redundant backhaul for our network as well. All that traffic right now is on a microwave network, and it gets us the ability to have a possible fiber connection to some of those locations too. We, as the director said, one of the verbiage in there that we changed it to may, each one of these sites would require site analysis, structural analysis, security analysis, and in no way would we want to jeopardize public safety, which is the primary reason for WyoLink. We are expanding with newer technologies into the future, and we're making this system even more robust than it's ever been before. So we believe this would give us the opportunity to work with our state's service providers to help expand rural broadband where possible, and again, continue those positive relationships.
Committee, any questions for Director Reiner or Mr. Babbitt from WYDOT? Scanning, not seeing any at this time. So thank you both very much for being here. Might kick you back in the lobby for a second, but don't go too far. With that, if you do want to testify on this bill, please raise your hand if you're currently in the lobby. I see Mr. Glass and Ms. Zerga. We're going to bring in Mr. Glass from Laramie into the discussion. Give it about 5 seconds here. And there you are. Welcome, Ms.
Thank you, Chairman Zwanitzer and members of the committee. I hope that you're all staying safe and healthy. I am a broadband provider in Laramie, Wyoming, and we're the world's first wireless broadband provider, and so we have a great interest in the possibility of using state facilities. We have 2 minor concerns with this bill, which you may want to address. The first is that the language was weakened so that it says may rather than shall, and it doesn't provide any additional encouragement to WYDOT to necessarily to lease the space. Now, I understand the concerns about making sure that things are safe, making sure that in no way it's harmful to put it there. But is there any? I'd like to ask the committee if there's some way that they could offer a little bit of additional encouragement to WYDOT to issue these leases. The second thing I'd like to ask is, can anything be added to the bill to allow us to create a pole or a tower in the right of way if there's none there? In a lot of cases, we can go to a certain point, and then there isn't a next tower along that particular highway. So I'm wondering if there's a possibility of addressing that. Anyway, those are my two comments, and please, I'd be glad to address this further or talk to members of the committee offline if there's a possibility of doing either of these things. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Glass. Let me just make sure I understand your second comment, Wes. You're looking at more like a public-private partnership where you partner with WIDOT to put up a new tower instead of lease space on there?
Exactly. There are some areas where there are towers. WIDOT, as you know, if you've driven along the highways, has cameras on towers along the way, and they go a certain distance down the highway, and then there isn't a next tower. But there are people there who want broadband. So I want to find out if there's any way to make sure that we're able to partner with WIDOT to extend something, but maybe put up something new in the right of way, such that we can reach those areas.
Thanks. I appreciate that clarification, and I'm not sure that's doable on this piece of legislation, but I always enjoy public-private partnerships like that. Committee, any questions for Mr. Glass? I'm not seeing any, Brett, but thank you for being with us today, and I hope Lariat's going well, and you enjoy the rest of your day.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you. With that, we're going to bring in Ms. Zerga, Wyoming Telecom Association. And committee, it's loading up. Please welcome Ms. Zerga. Welcome, Liz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm Liz Zerga, and I represent the Wyoming Telecommunications Association. Mr. Chairman, members of the Corporations Committee, this is one of the smaller bills that we worked on, a small piece, as Director Reiner indicated, of a very large topic that we dealt with quite a bit over the interim. And the Wyoming Telecommunications Association supports House Bill 15 as written. It may provide in limited situations the ability to expand broadband to rural areas. We don't see it as a big game changer, but nonetheless, it is one small tool in the toolbox that might be of use. And I would stand for any questions.
All right. Questions from Ms. Zerga. Representative Ayer, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Zerga, do you have any concerns about any of the language that was stricken in this bill?
Ms. Zerga, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Representative Ayer. This was, so part of the problem was that we simply do not go to the Public Service Commission for this kind of thing. So a large portion of this is language that was going before the Public Service Commission to get authorization. There is a portion of it down towards lines 15, 16, 17, 18 that is reflective of there would be a finding that that there wasn't capacity on any other communications infrastructure nearby. And so what's happened with these towers is I see this bill as implementing something that is already in practice at WYDOT. After Director Reiner came on board, there were discussions about the potential to lease tower space. And what I see this as is a codification of what the practice is currently. So no, I don't really have a problem with it being stricken. I do recognize that in cases, it's possible that there might be another tower that is near the WYDOT tower and that the WYDOT tower could end up being cheaper. But I don't represent tower companies. Those are often independent tower companies. I represent telecommunications and broadband providers. In some instances, they do have their own towers, but I see the overlap between potential towers to be very small.
All right, further questions from Ms. Zerga? Not seeing any, Liz, but always a pleasure to see you and work with you on corporations again.
Very good to see you, Mr. Chairman. Good to see all of you. Thank you.
Enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you. Next up committee will be Mr. Woody from Union Wireless as he's joining the room. Welcome, Brian, to corporations. Good to see you.
Good to see you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I think this is a good bill. Again, as Ms. Zerga said, doesn't change the practice overly for us as a carrier. I think it just hopefully will streamline the process, dedicate some of the dedicate the revenue from it to YDOT to maintain those towers, and overall I think it helps out the state. So
Mr. Woody, I announced you were with Union, but if you'd officially state your name and title for the committee. I know we all know you, but it's for the record.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman. I'm Brian Woody, the Chief Customer Relations Officer for Union Telephone Company.
Nice. All right, committee. Any just questions for Mr. Woody? Representative Roscoe, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Brian, I was just wondering, after hearing the last two people talk about possible new towers within the YDOT easements, and with Ms. Zerga, it seems like something that might be coming in front of this corporation committee in the future. Do you have an opinion on that? Is that going to help our broadband expansion in Wyoming? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Sure, Mr. Woody, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Roscoe, I think that could help in a lot of places, especially in the case where YDOT already has facilities close to or in highway right-of-ways, to expand on the towers that they have there, because most of those towers wouldn't support us, at least the equipment that Union Telephone puts on our towers. But it would definitely shorten the time for right-of-way. And in some cases, there are facilities that YDOT has today that are much shorter towers and much smaller towers than we would typically have, that once you cross the fence, you can't get the right-of-way from either BLM or other federal agencies that possess that ground today or manage that ground today. So I think that would help in a lot of places. It's just getting that particular piece into a bill or this bill.
Good, Representative Roscoe.
Thank you. That's a very good point. Thank you.
I agree. Further questions for Brian? Not seeing it at this time, Mr. Woody, but certainly thank you for being here and keep up the good work with Union, one of our Wyoming companies.
Yeah.
Thank you. With that committee, I don't think there's anyone else in the waiting room wishing to testify on this bill. Director Reiner, I don't know if you had any closing comments during public comment you wanted to share. I thought I'd give you one more bite of the apple if you wish.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think the only thing I'd add after listening to this testimony is that House Bill 14, which was again part of that big broadband process and bill that was worked and it was broken out, actually addresses our right-of-way issues. And so would concur that that's outside the scope of this bill.
But hopefully we all get a crack at House Bill 14 and if it hits the floor. With that, well, thank you, Director. Committee, seeing no further public comment, is there a motion on the bill? Would anyone like to move House Bill 15? Representative Duncan?
I'll move.
Oh,
Second.
Okay, seconded by Representative Hunt. Any discussion, committee, on House Bill 15? Amendments, thoughts? Seems like a pretty good idea to me, and we probably could go further, but sensing that you guys on this committee and gals listen to a larger bill discussion, and this is the product, I certainly support it.
Question.
And question being called, and seeing no further discussion, Ms. Nord, if you would call the roll.
Mr. Chairman, this is a roll call vote for House Bill 15, Department of Transportation Communication Facilities. Representative Blackburn.
Aye.
Representative Clausen.
Aye.
Representative Clifford.
Aye.
Representative Duncan.
Aye.
Representative Ayer.
Aye.
Representative Hunt.
Aye.
Representative McGuire.
Aye.
Representative Roscoe.
Aye.
Chairman Zwanitzer.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, that bill passes unanimously.
Thank you, Ms. Nord. And committee, besides Representative Duncan, would anyone like to floor manage House Bill 15? I'm looking at you, Representative Blackburn, possibly Representative McGuire. Representative McGuire, you want to take it? All right. House Bill 15 will go to Representative McGuire for floor manage. He's also on Transportation and Military Affairs, so that should be beneficial, especially if he's stuck doing House Bill 14. Committee, we're running a little ahead of agenda, so I guess at this time I will say let's take a 10-minute break, reconvene about 2:55. LSO, if you would put up the customary screen, I'll remind you to mute your microphones and turn off your cameras, and we will meet back at 2:55. Again, Mr. Babbitt, General Reiner, thank you for presenting on this bill. I will move you out of the waiting room at this point, and we will reconvene at 2:55. Well, committee, we'll give it about 30 seconds to get a quorum. And next up, we'll hear House Bill 27. While we're waiting, I'll go ahead and bring the Secretary of State's office into the meeting. There they are. Well, hi, everyone. We're waiting for about 3 more of our committee members to come back after the break. I'll give them about 10 more seconds, and if not, we'll just start without them. But with that, welcome, Ms. Wheeler. If you would, I guess, present who's there with you today and start walking us through House Bill 27.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I appreciate you having us this afternoon. Karen Wheeler, the Deputy Secretary of State, and with me I have Lisa Gonzalez, our Business Division Director, and Jordan Gray, our Assistant Business Division Director, and they will walk you through the bill and also answer any questions that you may have.
All right.
Chairman, I'll turn it over.
Well, welcome, Ms. Gonzalez.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. House Bill 27 addresses inconsistent statutory language throughout Title 17 and Title 40 of the business statutes. Additionally, this bill addresses statutory changes that are tied to our first 10% budget reduction. These changes address statutory required mailings of notices to entities. The bill consists of 33 pages that contain modifications to the business code. As we go through the bill, you will see that there are repetitive language throughout the bill, and it provides consistency and clarification between several of our business statutes. There are 5 components to the bill that are not in any particular order and are in different sections throughout the bill. To make it easier to understand, rather than going page by page, I'd like to break it up by subject so that we may be going back and forth between pages, if that's okay. Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, that's certainly great.
Perfect.
Please proceed.
I will start with page 1, beginning with line 12, and it continues to the second page. It begins with the powers. This section provides general rulemaking authority to the Secretary of State's office to promulgate rules and regulations to carry out the duties specified in 3 chapters. On page 2, the chapter 14, Title 17 refers to the Limited Partnership Act. Then we will jump to page 4, beginning with line 13. It covers chapter 21, Title 17. This is the Uniform Limited Partnership Act. And then on the bottom of page 4, continues to page 5, chapter 2 of Title 40. This is the trade name registration, and language has been added for each chapter. Back to page 2, beginning on line 8, and it goes through page 4. The second component references reinstatements following revocation for foreign nonprofit corporations. Our office worked with Mr. Hewitt on creating a new section, Wyoming Statute 17-19-1533, that constructs a method for foreign nonprofit corporations that have been revoked by our office to reinstate their business. These entities are revoked due to not filing an annual report or for not maintaining a registered agent. This mirrors our current law, Wyoming Statute 17-19-1422, for domestic nonprofit reinstatements. Now we're going to jump back to page 5. The third component refers to refusal to file documents. The Secretary of State's office refuses documents for different reasons under Wyoming Statute 17-16-125. Our office must return a refused document with an explanation for refusal within 15 days of submission. For consistency and clarity in filing times across all entity types, the refusal time period is 15 days, which has been added to the following section. Page 5 refers to trade name registrations. Again, page 5, line 7, I'm sorry, page 7, beginning with line 23, is limited partnerships. Page 11, with line 20, refers to nonprofit corporations. Page 15, beginning with line 12, is the Uniform Partnership Act. And then page 18, beginning with line 5, is registered limited liability partnerships. And then on page 19, beginning with line 21, is the unincorporated nonprofit associations. And then page 21, beginning with line 11, is the statutory trust. Page 26, beginning with line 10, is the Limited Liability Company Act. And then page 30, beginning with line 9, it's the statutory foundations. And the fourth component of the bill begins on page 21, beginning with line 22. This refers to conversions of entities. This section has been added to prevent situations where an entity can pay less for their formation by filing as one entity type and then converting to another entity type. The bill provides that if no fee is set in statute, the fee for conversion shall be equal to the fee for the new origination of the newly converted filing type. Then the last component of the bill begins on page 22. This section is important to address any changes that are tied directly to our first 10% budget reductions that our office put forward to the governor. The changes we are requesting create an alternative approach to provide legal notices and service a process to business entities other than through mail. In the current law, an entity can opt on allowing the Secretary of State's office to send legal notices to them electronically. This portion of the bill creates an alternative way to send these notices electronically without first receiving permission from the entity. Within this section, there is a sequence of amendments that specifically authorizes this electronic service by the Secretary of State's office. The primary change that allows this to happen in Chapter 28, Title 17. The chapter is amended to require registered agents and business entities to provide and maintain an email address that the Secretary of State's office may serve documents on the business entity or the registered agent. These changes within Chapter 28, Title 17 take place on page 22 through page 26. Alongside those changes are a variation of chapters of Title 17 that discuss notices and service of process delivered by the Secretary of State's office. They are amended by adding language that allow these services to be served by electronic means. And these began on page 6, which starts with cooperative marketing associations. Page 8, beginning on line 10, this covers profit corporations. Page 11, Chapter 19, nonprofit corporations. Page 16, beginning on line 18, covers Chapter 21, just partnerships. Page 19, beginning with line 18, covers unincorporated nonprofits. And then page 20, beginning on line 5, covers statutory trusts. Page 26, beginning with line 17, I believe, is limited liability companies. And then page 30 on line 6 covers statutory foundations. These notices are trade name and trademark renewals, notices to entities that have not filed their annual report upon their due date. Prior to this mailing notice, these businesses do receive 3 courtesy email notices 60, 30, and 10 days prior to their due date. Dissolution notices to entities that become inactive that have failed to file their annual report, These required mailings total over 12,000 notices a month, which equates to 156,000 mailings a year just from the business division. The cost of these mailings is $85,800 a year. The mailing budget for our entire office is $175,750. However, to meet the 10% budget cuts, the governor asked for part of our However, to meet the 10% budget cuts the governor has asked for, part of our reduction include reducing our mailing budget by $143,520, which leaves us with $32,232 remaining for a biennium for the entire office. Without the statutory change, the $32,230 that is left in our budget for mailing costs for our entire office will be depleted within 2 months. Just a side note, 90% of these notices are mailed to our commercial registered agents, including one that represents over 50,000 entities in Wyoming. As of today, we have determined that 113 business entities out of 23,802 active entities currently registered with our office have not provided us with email address. This is a total of 0%. We are willing to reach out to these entities to obtain a valid email address. Then last but not least, page 32, line 2, designates a new section created to Wyoming Statute 40-2-102, which is 40-2-111. Mr. Chairman, this is a quick overview of the bill, and we are happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thanks, Ms. Gonzalez. I thought that was great. Could you maybe elucidate a little bit what happens in regards to email? Let's say the 60-day notice goes out to an email and it gets bounced back, or a 30-day. Would you try to USPS? Would you call? What's the process now if an email address comes back invalid?
We try to collect as many valid email addresses as we can, but without a valid email address, we just let it go. It'd be the same as the mailing when we get documents back undeliverable without a good mailing address.
Do they get sent out like return receipt requested? I know you can do on some emails, or do you just never know if the recipient gets it or not if it's not bounced back?
Mr. Chairman, right now, when a new business entity files, we do email them a notification. And if it bounced back, we do try to notify them at that time. With these notices, we don't get back to them.
And when it says foreign corporation, that just means from another American state, is that correct? Where alien would be from a foreign country?
Mr. Chairman, foreign entity can be out of state or out of country.
Okay. All right, committee. I know many of you sat through 3 committee meetings on this bill, but for new members or any new questions that have popped up for the Secretary of State's office from members of the Corporations Committee. Saving $100,000 a year, that's a lot of money. Can I ask Ms. Gonzalez, is that, do you pay a person or an entity, or is it computer generated to do that many mailings per month? Are we looking at the loss of a position who's stuffing envelopes, or how does that get contracted out?
Mr. Chairman, I'll let the deputy answer this one.
Mr. Chairman, the cost that we're looking at is not, it's not going to cost a position, but the cost savings that we're looking at includes not only the postage, but the paper, the envelopes, and then our large Xerox printer in which we have to print each of these notices. We get charged per paper, piece of paper that we have to print off from there. So it's inclusive of all of that. And I will tell you that it takes several people in the business division once a month to compile all these notices, to sort them out, and to stuff the envelopes. But we will not be reducing it by an individual.
Excellent. Committee, further questions for the Secretary of State's office? Mr. Representative Hunt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I understand that the committee has hashed this over thoroughly, but just I'll try to keep it brief. As far as the I'm on the first page, a couple few pages here concerning with 1714-306, and I'm sorry I don't have a paper copy in front of me, so I'm just going off the website. But for filing an office and the new language subsection C, I guess is and that was just mentioned a second ago that partly answered what I was curious about as to what a foreign entity is, that it's not necessarily out of the country, but can be just out of state. Is this, had there just in general been issues with, because I know a few years ago, we took a stab at tightening up language to restrict shell corporations and other nefarious entities. But is this somewhat related to that, or is this more mundane? Is the reasoning for this more mundane in just simple oversight of paperwork, or is this an attempt to further crack down on corporations, quote unquote, who may not be who they claim they are?
Sure. Ms. Gray, do you want to fill this one since you're in the room?
Oh, sure. Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I would
You're
love
welcome.
to. So Representative Hunt, to answer your question, really it's just to be consistent with all of the other statutes to allow foreign nonprofits to reinstate if they don't file their annual report or if they don't maintain a registered agent. They're the only entity type that the statute is silent on allowing them to reinstate.
And Representative Hunt, I know it's probably been 8 years now that we did, when Representative Kermit Brown was in, we started allowing, a 2-year period to come back and refile and be readmitted with a fine or a fee, however you want to call it. So I'm not sure why we didn't cover this section back then. I don't know, Ms. Wheeler, did we discuss when we did this with other business entities and didn't catch this one purposefully or accidentally? Do you remember?
Mr. Chairman, I do remember the legislation working with Speaker Brown at the time. But I am afraid to say, I think the fact that we didn't include the nonprofit forums is something that fell through the cracks.
Okay. Corporations didn't catch it back then either, so we can all share in the culpability, I suppose. Any further questions for the Secretary of State's Office Committee? I'm not seeing any. You guys must have done perfectly well. With that, we're going to open it up to some public comment. First up will be Mr. Meyer. And welcome, Scott, to the new Corporations Committee.
Can you hear me now, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. I'm wearing two different hats here, Mr. Chairman. Scott Meyer on behalf of the Wyoming Bankers Association, and Scott Meyer as a practicing attorney with offices in Cheyenne and Lander. I've looked at all these changes that have been proposed by the Secretary of State's office, and I think really they are a long time in coming, and I would say that I support these wholeheartedly. The only reason I put my hand up to make sure that I could visit you a little bit was that I was involved a little bit with some of that stuff with Kermit Brown, and I will tell you that at that time we didn't think that there was an issue with the nonprofits. We did discuss it. We did kind of go through some of that language, but it was deemed not to be something that we had to really focus on at the time. Short-sighted.
Thank you, Mr. Meyer. I suppose the world changes as we go. Any questions for Mr. Meyer with the bankers or as a private attorney? Seeing none. You got off easy today.
Yeah, I did. Thank you.
With that committee, I don't see anyone else in the waiting room in regards to House Bill 27. So unless the Secretary of State's office has additional comments, I would close public commentary and ask for a motion on the bill. Don't all jump in.
Bill.
Moved by Representative Ayer, seconded by Representative Clifford. All right, committee, we are on House Bill 27. Is there any further discussion or amendments to come before corporations today? I'm looking at all 8 of your cameras and not seeing any. I know you've worked it diligently over the interim and question being called. So with that, please welcome Ms. Nord to call roll on House Bill 27.
Mr. Chairman, this is a roll call vote for House Bill 27, Business Code Revisions. Representative Blackburn.
Aye.
Representative Clausen.
Aye.
Representative Clifford.
Aye.
Representative Duncan.
Aye.
Representative Ayer.
Aye.
Representative Hunt.
Aye.
Representative McGuire.
Aye.
Representative Roscoe.
Aye.
Chairman Zwanitzer.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, that bill passes unanimously.
3 for 3 today, committee. I'd be happy to floor manage it unless any of you would like to jump up and take it. I'm seeing several shakings of the head, so I'll go ahead and take House Bill 27 to present on the floor next week. Thank you again, Deputy Director Wheeler, Ms. Gonzalez, Ms. Gray for joining us today. And I thought it went relatively painless and quick. So it's good that you can get out by 3:30 and enjoy the rest of your day. Committee, we only have 1 bill left. And with that, we're going to move on to House Bill. It is number, I'm looking it up here, sorry, committee, 29. And I'm not exactly sure what happened in the interim on burials for indigent persons. I know I brought a bill and a budget amendment last year, and it seems to be bifurcated. If indigents are on the POWER program, it goes to DFS, and if not, it goes to counties. And I know DFS is in the waiting room. Maybe we'll let in Miss Williams to discuss the bill first. And as we're waiting for that,
Mr. Chairman,
Representative Blackburn, go ahead.
I think Appropriations has that DFS bill that they're running similar to ours.
That is correct. It went before Appropriations yesterday. I guess we'll also bring in Ms. Schmidt and Ms. Arneson from DFS. I'm not sure what happened to the first presenter I brought in. But somebody should be joining us shortly in the webinar here. Maybe Zoom's being difficult. There's Ms. Schmidt. Welcome, Corn and Family Services. I don't know, did you want to present this bill to the committee, or are you just here to testify about what happened in appropriations yesterday?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm Corinne Schmidt, the Director of the Department of Family Services. And really, this is not our bill, so I would not feel comfortable walking through it, but certainly it does bring in our program, and we can give you an update as to what transpired in joint appropriations yesterday. And I'm going to be deferring to Christy Arneson to do the presentation when it's time, as she's the leader of the division in which this program is managed. So thank you.
Okay. Well, I'll attempt it, even though I'm new to the committee, as this was a bill and then a budget amendment I put forward last year. Really, committee, as you worked the bill in the interim, the counties currently pay for indigent burial expenses through our funeral homes and morticians throughout the state, and the reimbursement rate had not gone up. And we were getting to the point where it was excessively burdensome on the counties. Speaking of the counties, I just saw Mr. Riemann show up.
Mr. Chairman.
Representative Duncan?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Basically, this is exactly what we already saw, except it's in its own bill because of the governor's veto. He didn't want it in a budget, so it had to come in separately. And correct me if I'm wrong, the rest of you, that There was an amendment at the end, and I don't remember if it's in here now, but for the states to be part of this as well.
All right, with that, Mr. Riemann appeared, and it's always happy to have Jeremiah join us. I know you weren't planning on presenting the bill to the committee today, but as I know you're intimately familiar with it, and maybe you could walk us through how the process works in regard to indigent burials with the counties. And then we can certainly talk to DFS about if those people are on the POWER or other governmental assistance programs, how we're bifurcating the cost split. But with that, Mr. Riemann, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm Jeremiah Riemann here on behalf of Wyoming County Commissioners. I'm happy to try and present the bill. This is something that came out of a conversation that was started with the Corporations Committee about local government efficiencies. And certainly one of the things that we were interested in is finding a solution for the costs that counties bear for burial of indigent persons. And so the committee did take up the issue. Mr. Chairman, I'll walk through a few of the relevant statute provisions that relate both to counties as well as DFS. And I hope Director Schmidt will clean up anything that I get wrong here. But I'll do that first, and then I'll get into the bill and how that kind of evolved from my perspective. So, Mr. Chairman, in Title 18, 3504C, that establishes the county responsibility for indigent burials. It covers non-DFS and non-veteran burials in that provision. And what it says is we are responsible for indigent burials for those without sufficient means in his own estate or other resources to provide for burial or cremation. In Title 42, 2103C is where the DFS responsibility comes in. And that's under the POWER program. POWER stands for Personal Opportunities with Employment Responsibilities. It also deals with supplemental security income, Medicaid. And interestingly, and this is different than what exists for counties, the DFS responsibility is capped at $1,000, whereas there is no limit on the county responsibility. Under Title 1914-101, that's the veterans provision. And that is a responsibility, again, of the counties out of the general fund. And in another little quirk and difference between the statutes, their transportation costs cannot exceed $500. And I suspect that you may hear testimony that that's not sufficient in all cases, and certainly understand that testimony. As Representative Duncan mentioned, and the good chairman mentioned, this was an issue that you all took up last year in the course of the budget negotiations. And through that, you did exactly what this bill essentially accomplishes. The governor did veto that, and I just wanted to read his veto message because I think it's relevant to this conversation. He said there that the creation of a new fee in the budget bill is problematic. The idea of better accounting for the costs of burial cremation for indigent people is noble, but I suggest that this should come back as a separate bill in the future. So I bring that forward because he wasn't saying that this wasn't something we should do. He's just saying we shouldn't. I think what in essence he was saying is don't budget legislate through the budget bill. So Mr. Chairman, the committee did bring this up and put together the legislation. In the course of the conversation, as the committee was meeting in the interim, I believe it was Senator Scott brought up the concern that the budget may reduce the available funds that DFS might have available for their indigent burial costs. And so he requested that they be amended into this bill in addition to this supporting counties. And the way that I think he tried to do it, and I think that's what the language says, is that the DFS office would be equal to counties, assuming that the reimbursement requests exceeded the available amount. So in other words, we would be equal peers, not that DFS or any other entity would have first priority on those funds. So, Mr. Chairman, I think the bill is pretty straightforward in what it's trying to accomplish and setting up the account for this to happen, assigning a $5 fee on death certificates. I think the fiscal note that was put together suggested that raises about $181,000. Mr. Chairman, I have some data that I collected from counties about policies that they've put in place to cap their liability here. It really does admittedly vary across the state. It also varies in terms of the expense year to year. I have many counties, and I asked them recently in the last week to give me some sense of their fiscal year 2020 expenses. I have counties where there were no indigent burial expenses. I have one county that had over $21,000 in expenses. And I have everything in between. And some of those counties that had zero in fiscal year 2020 had higher numbers in other years. I also know that we have some counties that have taken some unique approaches. Fremont County is one of those. They worked with the, as I understand it, the Department of Health to purchase a property within their jurisdiction to place indigent burial, or to actually undertake indigent burials to help reduce the costs that that county was bearing. So, Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to try and answer any questions. I know there are a lot of other experts here that have a lot more experience than I, but that I hope gives a good general background from our perspective.
Thanks. Any questions for the County Commissioners Association? Thank you for jumping in on that background. I remember the veto now. Seeing none from the committee, I saw Ms. Williams from the Treasurer's Office was on, and I know we are creating an account here. Dawn, any comments or discussion from the Treasurer or your office?
Thank you very much. I was going to follow the act of DFS. I did visit with them about this bill. For the committee, my name is Dawn Williams. I'm the Deputy State Treasurer, and I appreciate the opportunity to testify today. There are two things actually that I'd like to talk to you about. The first one is just a matter of housekeeping on page 2. On line 22, it says that the fees shall be collected by the, well, not on line 22, but in that section, it says that the fees shall be collected by the Department of Health. But line 22 says that they shall then be deposited by the state treasurer. And actually, if the Department of Health is receiving the fees, then they're actually the ones that are depositing the fees. So I would just respectfully request that on line 22, the bill be amended to remove the words by the state treasurer. And then that would also be consistent with language in other statutory provisions for fee collections. It's just customary that the agency that receives the fees will be the ones that deposit them. And then the other, speaking of removing the state treasurer from the bill on this line, we're surprised to find ourselves a part of this program, given that it does already exist in the Department of Family Services and would have seemed to be to us a natural, the natural responsibility of Family Services. But I hate to go before Family Services. This is not a surprise to Director Schmidt. We've visited about it. She did indicate to me that because they do have an existing program, and in fact stated in her opening remarks that that program is managed through Christie's division, or Ms. Arneson's, that it might be a more appropriate spot for this program to be handled. So With that, Mr. Chairman, I will stand for questions and really be available to respond after the department's testimony, if that's all right.
Representative Duncan has one right down the middle. Go ahead, Representative Duncan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Ms. Williams. Quick question, and I don't know if you have the answer or not. If the Department of Family Services were to be in charge of it, would this be fiscally less for them to manage versus your department to manage?
Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Williams.
Representative Duncan, if you mean fiscally less, maybe administratively less of a burden, Mr. Chairman, yes, Representative Duncan, it would be less of a burden for them than us.
Okay, we'll see if DFS agrees with that assessment. Further questions for Ms. Williams? Seeing none at this time, thank you, Don. We'll take those potential amendments into consideration here in just a second. With that, Ms. Arneson, I think you were already designated by the director to answer any questions or share comments on behalf of the Department of Family Services in regard to this bill. And maybe you could also, I know Director Schmidt went before appropriations yesterday morning to talk about your side of the legislation, and if you could kind of tie that in one big bow for us about how there's two separate bills for really the same similar issues, depending if they're on government assistance or not, and then give any thoughts from the department.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. Christy Arneson, Senior Administrator of the Economic Security Division with Department of Family Services, and appreciate the time to be here with you today. And just a quick overview so maybe everybody understands. Jeremiah did a great job. He said everything correctly, but just an overview of how the burial assistance program actually works within the Department of Family Services, but also would like to mention some budget reductions that relate to this program, and I also think will relate to this draft legislation going forward. So the burial assistance program is within Title 42, as Mr. Ryman said, and what that is a program in which we provide assistance on behalf of families for loved ones that when they passed away, they were either receiving Medicaid, SSI, or cash assistance, which is the TANF Power program. We currently pay up to $500 for eligible expenses for burial and cremation services. The statute, as Jeremiah mentioned, allows us a max to pay $1,000, so there's a cap. At one point in time, the department did pay up to $1,000 for those eligible expenses or those eligible burials and cremations. In 2016, with regards to budget reductions that took place then, a policy decision within the department was made to reduce those expenses or those payments are max to $500. So since 2016, the department on any eligible expenses has only been paying a cap of $5,000. This is not reflected in the statute. An amendment was not done, and that's because the statute is permissive. It doesn't require us to pay $1,000. It just allows us to pay up to $1,000. So no statutory amendment was done at that time, which is why the $1,000 still exists. Now, fast forward to just 2020. As you're all aware, many have already talked about it. We, as a state agency, were asked to reduce our state general fund expenditures and the state general fund within our standard budget. A lot of time and effort and thought was taken into these decisions, and during the step 2 budget reductions, which are already in place, the department decided to eliminate the burial program completely. The burial program is 100% state general fund, so that has been eliminated. However, the footnote you all discussed, yes, was vetoed. However, the funding that was tied to that footnote in 2020 went forward. So the Department of Family Services received $123,000 in one-time funding for this burial assistance program. The department did not reduce or eliminate that one-time funding for these last round of budget reductions. And this was intentional because we knew that conversations were going to need to happen, such as the one today, with regards to funding for ongoing burial assistance. So as of the beginning of this biennium, July 1, the department has been utilizing that $123,000 to pay for burial assistance. As of today, we've paid just under $47,000 out in expenses. So projections, if the next 6 months are similar to the first 6 months, we will have expended $94,000 at the end of the first year of this biennium, leaving just over $30,000 for the second year of the biennium. And this is important because of the mechanics, I think, of the bill. You will see it in our fiscal note. It's based on a reimbursement method, which would only work if the department has funding within its budget to pay for costs up front. And as we sit today with our budget, once that $123,000 is expended or depleted, there is no more money within the department to pay for burial assistance. And I think this comes into, we have a few questions or some clarifications we would ask of the committee on the draft legislation. One question would be, it talks about reimbursement of expenditures. So the first question would be related to, we're currently expending dollars out of the one-time funding. So would that one-time funding be eligible for reimbursement if this draft legislation were to pass? And I think that's important because if so, it would give us that ongoing funding within our budget to pay for upfront costs going forward. And then I think then the second question tied to the funding is the frequency. We didn't see in the bill where it laid out how often there would be an appropriation or a disbursement, not only just to the agency, but also to the counties. So we're curious thoughts on the frequency of when that would occur. And Mr. Chairman, to your point on House Bill 47, which is the one that was up in appropriations, House Bill 47 is a direct consequence, I shall say, of our budget reduction. The statute mandates, it's a shall, that the department pay burial assistance because we no longer have funding in our standard budget for that. The bill in front of appropriations is pretty simple in nature, in that what it does is add language to make it more flexible to say the department shall pay basically if funds are available to it to pay. And so that's the tenet of the bill in front of appropriations. So I think along the same lines in that it ties to burial, but a little bit different than the content and substance of this bill.
And it did pass the committee yesterday, Ms. Arneson?
Mr. Chairman, yes, it did pass out of appropriations yesterday, or passed initial. And I'm happy to, so hoping to look for a little information, Mr. Chairman or committee, on the questions, but also here to answer any questions that anyone may have with regards to the program within our department, and also with regards to the budget reductions that have been taken by our department.
Go ahead, Representative Duncan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Arneson, can you respond to Ms. Williams' comment that it would work well and be appropriate to be in your department? And then I have a follow-up after that.
Ms. Arneson, if you'd like that, or ship it to your director, your choice.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Duncan, you may have read my mind. I might defer to Director Schmidt. I think there probably has to be some discussion around that, and I might let her do that since she spoke with Ms. Williams on the phone about it this morning.
Ms. Schmidt, go ahead if you'd like to ask for that in your program. Feel free to, or your thought.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Representative Duncan. The question really comes around, we have our program that is for a very specific eligible category. And then based on the testimony of Mr. Riemann, we have counties then who make their own decisions based on whatever local protocols are in place. The conversation with Ms. Williams was really about, is the Treasurer's Office set up to run a program like this? And it is not typically their function, not to speak on behalf of Ms. Williams, but it is within our function. So I think what we're willing to offer is, if there's more clarification about how the monies get distributed to the counties, and that we have clear guidelines on how that would occur, we could then, of course, manage the program just as we do for indigent burials for people who are, when they passed, were either recipients of TANF or POWER. So I would request that the committee put in more parameters in order for us to be able to manage it. Another possibility is that we receive the funds and then we contract those funds to, for example, the Wyoming County Commissioners Association, and then they could be responsible for distributing those dollars as well. So we could act as a pass-through for those funds. Based on the formula that you've given here, it'd be 50-50. So whatever reimbursements we've received from BSS, we would just split it in half, send half to Mr. Riemann, keep half for burials for our qualified clients.
Director Schmidt, is some of the issue and the bifurcation that exists now because you can use federal funds or TANF funds in some cases to cover indigent burials if they are on governmental assistance programs? Is that federal funding, or is it all state funding or a match?
Mr. Chairman, it's 100% general funding. We don't have any federal funds. Where we may see some federal funds is just by the use of our eligibility workers who are making the determinations of what services are reimbursable, but that would be fairly minor. I think we had 172 clients last year, or 172 families that requested reimbursement. So it's not a significant amount of work for us.
Okay. Further questions, Director Schmidt? I know Mr. Riemann wants another bite of the apple here. Mr. Riemann, did you want to add on to that?
Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to provide one clarification piece. I think the intent of the Corporations Committee during the interim was not that it would be split 50-50, but rather that each of the 23 entities plus the Department of Family Services would get equal percentages if you exceeded the total available allocation. So that's why it says each county, and then it has DFS in there. Again, that's my recollection of the conversation, and I just want to make sure that that's clear.
So, Mr. Riemann, while you're testifying, I guess an abstract question I just want your opinion. Do you think it's the county's responsibility for indigent burials? Because just when we say indigent, I don't know what the percentage might be, but it's difficult for me to believe that these would be a long tenured member of the community, someone who'd been in that county for 30 years, and it's the county's responsibility. When I think of indigent burial, I think of people who are, transitory. They can't find family members. They probably haven't been in that community for a long time. Would that be correct? I mean, I don't know if you have the numbers, but how many of these indigent burials per county are long-serving county residents, and how many just happen to be, commuting through and ended up in, Laramie County for Frontier Days or visiting somewhere else in Wyoming and they can't find next of kin, if that makes sense? Should it really be at a county level, or should it be at a statewide level in your mind?
Well, Mr. Chairman, I don't have the specific answer for you, but my sense, based on the conversations that I've had with counties, is that we are dealing with a lot of individuals that are long-term residents of a particular location. Now, there are certainly those that pass through and might be caught here. I want to be really clear, and I think this is the same for DFS right now, and I know they're trying to go from an absolute that they have to do it to a permissive. In Title 18.3504C, it's a straight shall. The county has an obligation to do this unless it falls into that power, responsibility, supplemental security income, or Medicaid, as I mentioned. So it is a requirement that we have, and nobody's offered that relief to us that it become a may. But I do also respect the conundrum that's presented here, because my folks are required to do it regardless and have to put that money out there. And so setting up a program that's reimbursable makes sense. I understand the difference that exists for DFS and why that could be problematic here.
Thanks. Committee, Representative McGuire, question for anybody. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and This may be a little bit to the side, but I'd like to ask it anyway at this point, especially to Jeremiah. My question is, within this legislation, should we be putting in a standard package price? And the reason that I bring that up is when I was in a position where I was involved with some of these at the county level, and nothing against the people who are providing the services at all, but it seemed like every time I had to recreate the wheel and renegotiate and beat down and renegotiate every time. So I'm just wondering, within this package, should we be including some standard guidelines so that we so that it's the same from county to county and provider to provider? Thank you.
Mr. Riemann, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, Representative McGuire, I think my counties would say absolutely. They'd love to see that uniformity. Right now, it really does vary across the state. I'm just looking through some of the data I have that where counties have established maximums in some sort of rule and regulation. Those range anywhere from $1,000 to, let's see, I've got one here at $2,600 per burial. I think it would provide some consistency. Frankly, it would be nice to have some parity with the Department of Family Services in that not to exceed range of $1,000. That would certainly be helpful.
And we do have representatives from the Funeral Home Association that are going to present here in a second as well after we're done with the state agencies, who I think can talk about why the charges are what they are in each individual county. Representative Hunt, did you have a question?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Also a question to Mr. Riemann. Currently, I mean, with the language that's currently in statute, saying that the county commissioners, have a responsibility to take care of this, are they, just from an informational standpoint, how are the commissioners informed? I mean, typically, is there some sort of an annual report that they reimburse based on, or is it just as an as-needed basis where, the manager of the cemetery or somebody from the cemetery board comes in and as needed and says, hey, we had an indigent burial last week, just FYI, and here's a voucher for you, to take care of that. How is that handled?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Representative Hunt. Typically, that first contact comes from the county coroner to the county commissioners. And then subsequent to that, a voucher is submitted for reimbursement, either within the parameters that the county has established or at expense.
Okay, follow up, good? I think you're good. All right, further questions? Let's bring in Mr. Urbikite and Ms. Kaiser on behalf of industry. And I'm sure they can talk to you about the need and perhaps talk about why different mortuaries charge different amounts. Hi, Mr. Urbikite.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Kyle Urbikite. I'm here today representing the Wyoming Funeral Directors Association. Listening to all the testimony, and even before, obviously, we understand that there are multiple parties and entities throughout the state affected by this issue. But our belief is that our members are the most directly and negatively impacted by it. We support this legislation because our belief is providing funding and creating a source for it is the fastest and most efficient way to address the concerns of all parties involved. That seems to us the most logical first step. And, we can't forget the time we're in now. This has been an issue for the association for decades, but, we're in a global pandemic. Our members are facing 3 to 4 times the number of deaths they usually do, many of which are indigent. As has been discussed, there are multiple avenues to arrive at the title of being an indigent burial. And, their costs and expenses for dealing with this, especially now, are going up, and has been discussed in the meeting today, their reimbursements are going down. This is a model that is unsustainable. If it continues, our members will have no choice but to increase all of their fees and pass this burden down to the public. We obviously understand the concerns of the counties and state agencies, but our members are private citizens and local business, and they're actually bearing the brunt of this expense. And that is our main problem. We obviously have discussions going forward about responsibilities, but I think we can all agree it should not be the responsibility of private citizens and local business to maintain the expense of public health. That is our position. I don't want to take up too much time. I know it's getting late, and I appreciate your consideration and time, and I would stand for any questions.
So, Mr. Urbikite, some of the questions surround if there is a standard cost of care or industry standard for what it costs to conduct a burial. Would you have any information on that, on what would be a fair cost?
Mr. Chairman, thank you for the question. That's obviously looming large in our minds, but we think that's secondary. Our main concern is this bill right now. If we don't create some kind of funding source that will provide relief to everybody involved, we're heading towards critical mass. And so that's where we want to start. Of course, moving ahead, we're going to need legislation for years to come, and continuity around the state would be the next step. But we won't have the luxury of having the time to figure that out or legislate it if we don't provide assistance to these funeral practitioners.
Okay. Further questions? Thanks. Representative McGuire.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Urbikite, and it may be for moving on in the future, but through your association, could you please try to look and see if there is a national average, or if other states tie it to, for example, the DFS rate or the military rate, to see if there is something out there that is perceived as fair across the board? And also, with regard to that, I'm always sensitive to prices do fluctuate with inflation and everything. So I would prefer to tie it to a rate that's a national rate or something that's accepted, as opposed to say, okay, today it's $1,000, and then 5 years from now we come back and we have to argue about how much inflation has adjusted that. So if you could please take a look and see if there is something that is accepted within your associations, I would appreciate that very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Representative McGuire, thank you for the request. We have looked into this nationally, and unfortunately, it's as varied throughout the country as it is in every state. There are multiple ways to address this issue. Some states created indemnities for liability so that they could cremate bodies at a much lower cost. Some, address it differently on the county and state levels. Again, the one thing we can all agree on, and does happen predominantly throughout the nation, is, public health is a fiscal responsibility of state and or local governments, not private citizens. So that's our main concern. Again, we're going to work this issue for years into the future to make it as efficient and less costly to everybody involved. But, we're stampeding towards a cliff right now. And we have to stop this bleeding. We have to do something. And this bill we really support. We think this is a good and solid first step towards building an actual infrastructure where we can understand these expenses better around the state and move the funds around more efficiently to cost less for everybody. I hope that answers the question. I know there's more data to be gained. The main point is that, this is a mess for everybody in the whole country, not just our state. And everyone has their own solution. We can gather more data to see whatever would be, more desirable for our communities, and we would be happy to get that to you.
Thanks. Ms. Kaiser, I see you also joined us. I'm assuming on behalf of the funeral directors, any additional comments?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sherilyn Kaiser with the Wyoming Funeral Directors Association. I just came on to assist Mr. Urbakite with any kind of specific numbers that we had. We did have a survey of our funeral directors, our membership in 2019, and only 10 of our counties responded. And I just wanted to respond to a couple of specific points that it looks like that we were trying to zero in on. You know, with every county, it varies. You know, and some counties will provide a plot. Sometimes they'll provide assistance, budget $2,500, budget $1,500. Some of the out-of-pocket expense in those cases would be $600. But I think in the focus of the issue at hand is we do appreciate that the committee is considering establishing a fund with fees, so there can be some consistency with the funding that is available to our practitioners. And also in looking at, you know, a list of services, you know, including, you know, lots, caskets, opening and closing, and some of the hard costs that our practitioners have out-of-pocket expenses. And so we're happy to share some of that data. It's a little dated, you know, since 2019, but the average cost is around $2,500, and regardless of depending on whether the county, you know, kicks in $600 or, you know, donates a plot, or, you know, it's full out-of-pocket expense. You know, just every county treats it differently. So it's also our hope that we could find some consistency there across the board. So we appreciate the work that the committee is putting into this. With that, Mr. Chairman, I stand with any questions.
Representative Duncan.
Thank you, Chairman Zwanitzer. I'm not sure whether this is for Ms. Kaiser or for Mr. Riemann, but have the two parties communicated and shared the issue of the inconsistencies? And are the counties, because some counties are requiring vaults and some counties are requiring just plots, and just it seems very random between county to county. And if we wanted parity, I'm just thinking that we have to have parity with the counties first. So just what your thoughts are, and have you guys communicated at all?
Ms. Kaiser, go ahead if you want to answer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Duncan, I'd have to say that, yes, we did contact the county commissioners during last session. They were very helpful, and a lot of the information that we received came from the association itself. And so I think, yes, the conversations are happening. And so, and we're looking forward to additional conversations, and we'd like to see the immediate need of funding, but we'd also like to look at, you know, further. We have suggested in the past that we look at interim study, and that we look at a lot of the provisions and some of the services, and we can just take that holistic view.
Okay. Further questions for the Funeral Directors Association? Seeing none at this time, thank you, Ms. Kaiser, Mr. Urbakite, for being with us today. As I heard on appropriations yesterday, certainly in need out there, and I don't believe it's private businesses' responsibility to continue to bear the brunt in some of these cases to go through the cost of proper burials. How that being said, how we fix this, I guess, is up for debate. So I think we've heard from everyone involved. Committee, do you have further discussions for Director Schmidt or Ms. Arneson, Mr. Riemann, or Ms. Williams from the Treasurer's Office? Go ahead, Representative McGuire.
This would be for Director Schmidt if she is back. I don't see her on the screen, but anyway, my question would be if DFS has a set schedule, and also within that schedule, if it has a breakout, for example, so much for the casket, so much for the viewing. And so ultimately what I'm getting to is if the county provides a plot, then that it's not taken into account with regard to the reimbursement. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Schmidt, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Representative McGuire, if you can see me. We don't have a set schedule. What we have is a policy about what expenses we will cover. And so the invoice is submitted to us, we review the invoice, and then we make a decision about what expenses on that invoice are coverable under our program, and then issue the payment to the funeral home. So it's up to $500. So any one of those items that are eligible, we will pay up to $500. Sometimes we don't make the full $500 payment. It just depends on the expenses incurred.
So, Ms. Schmidt, do you then, in some cases, partner with the counties where you'll pay the first 500 and then the county pays the additional? Or you just do the reimbursement and the funeral home then contracts with the county in those cases for any other expenses that they can defer? Is that how it works?
Mr. Chairman, no, we don't communicate with the counties about any expenses that they may cover. Our transaction is basically families applying for the benefit, us issuing a reimbursement to the funeral home for those expenses. And I think, Mr. Riemann, correct me if I'm wrong, but the county would not be paying for clients who are eligible for our programs. So I don't see where there would be any cross negotiation that would occur, because it's either qualifying for the county or qualifying for the DFS program.
Mr. Riemann, that's correct in your mind?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Director Smith's correct. If they qualify for their program, that county responsibility ends.
Okay. Representative McGuire.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I apologize for asking all these questions, but one last one. And this is a if you know. With regard to the VA or any other national entity, is there a set of acceptable expenses that you've ever seen? Is there especially I would think that the VA would have something. Thank you.
If anyone knows, feel free to raise your hand.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Riemann.
I don't know whether the VA has a program, but as I mentioned, subject to Title 19-14-101, and I was just trying to quickly get there. Counties are responsible in those situations for indigent burial expenses, and the statute there reads that the Board of County Commissioners of each county shall provide for the preparation of the body and transmittal to the burial in the veteran cemetery of any other than a dishonorably discharged veteran of the armed forces in the United States who serves on behalf of the United States in any war or conflict as defined in Section 101, Title 38 USC Code, and who dies leaving insufficient funds to defray the funeral costs. The amount of expended for transporting the body shall not exceed $500. So that is the veterans provision that I'm aware of.
Okay. So what I think I'm understanding, Ms. Williams, is right now we believe there's an account in DF. Well, I guess my question, where do you apply? There's no account right now, Mr. Riemann, for any state funding whatsoever. It's totally done by counties.
Mr. Chairman, this is currently, when it comes to county expenses, from their general fund.
Okay. And so if we do set up a fund, Ms. Williams is saying it probably shouldn't be in the treasurer's office, because it's just one more step that Department of Health, that's where Vital Records is, has to submit money to the treasurer, and then they hold it in an account and they distribute it. And I think I agree with Ms. Williams, it just doesn't need that step. Perhaps my question then, if anyone knows, Mr. Riemann or Ms. Schmidt, the Department of Health through Vital Records, were they consulted on the fund being in their jurisdiction and they're getting to divvy up this program? I'm new to the committee, so I missed the interim testimony. Has that been discussed? Anyone know?
Mr. Chairman, sorry.
Sure, Ms. Williams, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I can't answer your question directly, but what I can tell you is that funds are regularly created in our WOLF's accounting system. And the Department of Health would simply deposit that $5 surcharge into that fund. And under our proposal, DFS would manage that fund then and the dollars in it at that point. So it's just a matter of simple accounting.
It's a great proposal. I know Ms. Schmidt is loving it right now. But I do, yeah, if it's that easy that it's in Wilson County, they upload it and it goes to a pot of money somewhere, the ultimate, and I think we all agree that we have a funding source that nobody's talked about. The question is who gets to do the administrative burden of reimbursing counties? Representative Duncan, thoughts?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As I'm reading this, trying to think of how to amend this, I'm reading further. It also talks about that the funds within the account shall be invested by the state treasurer, and all investment earnings from the account shall be deposited into the account. We'd still have to address that too, because the funds are being invested, they still have to go to the treasurer to be invested. So just throwing out another wrench.
Mr. Chairman.
Williams, go ahead if you have to invest or you just leave it up to the agency pool standard. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Duncan, all of the funds are invested under the purview of the state treasurer. We don't manage all of them though. So any fund that you have a fee in Department of Ag, they collect fees for their weights and measures, or the fees that Department of Health collects, or DCI collects background check fees. All of those accounts are housed on WOLF and then invested in, and then the treasurer's office, we collect all of those monies in concert, and then we just keep them in those buckets and we invest them accordingly in that state agency pool, as the chairman was speaking about. So this is just a normal course of business. It isn't that we manage every fund that is invested. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah. So I guess it's not even a question, but Ms. Arneson, if we did transfer this over to you, I'm assuming you could put together an administrative agency impact statement in the next week of what it might cost based on reimbursements to have whichever position oversees this now take on the extra responsibility of dealing with counties and reimbursing through that account. Do you know, Director Schmidt or Ms. Arneson, if other family service departments, whatever they're called in each state, handle, or would we be unique in this respect if it was tasked to your department? No idea.
Mr. Chairman, I'm looking to Christy to see if she knows of any other states. I'm not familiar with how other states handle this. I do believe is what Mr. Riemann is saying, and I think Mr. Urbikite hit on this too, is that it starts as a public health issue, which is why then the counties have had that responsibility. And then as money maybe has become available, then giving it to the state for folks that would be eligible just because of low income. And I do request, yes, we can do an impact statement. That won't be difficult at all, but I would appreciate more clarification and direction about the engagement with the counties. We know what our program is, and we can, whatever the funding source, it doesn't matter to us. We would manage it as we always have. However, introducing the counties and the county commissioners into this conversation does create a little bit of a different issue. So if there could be clarification, and I think it goes to what Representative McGuire is getting at, is what would be the threshold, what would be the parameters of the program and the reimbursements, because there could be a tendency to deplete those funds fairly quickly.
And right now, the legislation says it goes in equal percentage reimbursements to, DFS jurisdiction and county jurisdiction, which I imagine if you're running everything probably doesn't need to be the case, and then requires you to make decisions in some cases, which I don't think you want to make without some more rules and regs. So interim corp committee, what the heck happened here? Discussion from any other committee members on where they'd like to see this go. I think Representative Clifford.
I just wanted to make a comment or ask a question, and so I'm not answering your question, Chairman, sorry, But how many copies are recommended for a death certificate for a person? So we're talking about fees, and I'm just concerned about that total cost and that effect on that person.
Anyone know the standard number of death certificates? I tend to get 2 on a couple of my family. But
When we had a situation, Mr. Chairman, there was, I think, 5. So when we have probate, we have situations with real estate and stuff that we've dealt with, they typically have gotten 5. I don't know if that's the correct number, but that seems to be the number that our clients come in and saying they have, because you have to have originals for these different things, especially like if it's property and then whatever else, you have to have an original filed. So.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman?
Yep, Director Schmidt.
If I may, I don't believe that the Department of Health was asked for a fiscal impact, but based on our research, what we found was that there are 36,200 death certificates issued, but I don't know if each of those death certificates are treated equally in terms of the cost. I believe that there was at one time in Vital Statistics a sliding fee based on the number. So, X number of dollars for the first how many, and then $2 for every one after that. So I do think Vital Statistics would be able to provide you with maybe better information about the number of death certificates that are issued and how much money would potentially be generated as a result.
Okay. Representative McGuire, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and members of the committee. I don't want to be new to the party and start trying to take something in a different direction. However, I would like to see, at least as this bill progresses, I would like to see at some point an opportunity or an effort be made to create a schedule. And the reason being is, from the Government Efficiency Committee, the people who came in to look at government efficiencies within the state of Wyoming said, no matter what we do, and again, a lot of it is because we're a very rural state, but we recreate the wheel all over the state to the detriment. And every time that we have people that are reworking something that's already been done somewhere else, there's an expense with regard to time, and that time is something that somebody else could be doing. So I would recommend, however it be, whether it be further study or if it just be an amendment with a placeholder, but I would certainly like to see some kind of an effort made that we could try to standardize this so that people aren't wasting time. And I don't mean that in a bad way. Maybe I should say that they are spending unnecessary time to do the same thing over and over again. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Representative McGuire. Ms. Arneson, what's the bill number that appropriations has? Do you know off the top of your head?
Mr. Chairman, it's House Bill 47.
Okay. And I do want you to know I completely appreciate the idea that you're going to one legislative committee saying we need to get rid of this and make it a may and take it off our plate, and you're having another legislative committee say, here, take on more. And the internal inconsistency is a problem. And so I just want to put that out there, that I can imagine what's going through your head right now. That being said, I'm wanting to look through the other bill real quick to see what type of amendments I can put in one bill going forward. So I'm asking the committee to ask another question. Somebody has another question, right? So I can go read real quick. Representative Clifford, Representative Duncan, question, go.
Mr. Chairman, my question is, with all these questions up in the air, that maybe this, and just kind of asking the whole committee, maybe this needs to have a little more time till our next committee meeting versus trying to get it in for this next virtual session, so that maybe by then we can have all these questions answered and prepare some amendments or something, or even know what direction the other bill's going.
And so Representative Duncan, I just looked at the other one quickly, and I think you can amend this bill or something similar into House Bill 47 pretty easily. And so I'm perfectly comfortable right now laying this bill back. And we don't have to kill it today. We just leave it on the plate and see if we can take a crack at an amendment as appropriations moves their bill forward. If Representative Ayer has a question or would like to elucidate that motion.
Well, I'm not going to, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm not going to talk about that potential motion. I just keep having a question run through my mind. I should have asked this a while ago, probably, for Mr. Urbicite, probably. I gathered from the testimony that he gave, or that you gave, that the total amount that the practitioners are being reimbursed does not come near to covering the cost that they're incurring. Do you have any estimate of what it is that your practitioners are incurring that they're not being reimbursed for?
Mr. Chairman,
go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Ayer. Yeah, and I sent it to the committee. The estimation rounds up to about 2,500, and I'm still collecting data from the association, but yeah, it's the things we've discussed previously. The plot, the casket, the vault, those costs alone average up to at least $1,500. And, it's a very comprehensive service they provide. If you're looking at even the smaller costs, the softer costs, you're talking about 24-hour accessibility to them, for them to do first responder calls, like everything moving forward from that. So the 2,500 doesn't even cover the whole cost. There will still be overhead for them. They will still pay a little bit out of pocket unless they're very lucky to live in a county that fully reimburses them. And it is hard to collect that data. Like we've talked about a lot. This whole system doesn't have any uniformity. It's hard to track. That's why we want to just create a funding source to, where we won't have to argue about where the money's coming from or who has to pay it. We'll create the money and distribute it as equitably as possible. That's why we really want to focus on this bill first. And if I may, going to the question before that from appropriations, I was in that meeting and they actually want to lay their bill back until they see what happens with this bill. They would like to amend language into their bill that connects to the account we're trying to create here. So if we lay both bills back, I see a conflict.
Yeah, and I'm more comfortable now that I've read them and thought about the fees in this bill coming from Vital Records. This bill does need to stay alive. So with that, any other questions for public comment from the committee? And I don't see any, so we'll thank all of the presenters for throwing an input today. And we'll say this bill is on the table. Committee, what do you want to do with it? Representative Blackburn.
Mr. Chairman, do we know for certain if appropriations laid this bill back, or?
I think they voted on it, but they will hold it pending the outcome of this bill on the floor. And then this is the funding mechanism is in this bill, not in appropriations bill, which makes this one the bill needed to move forward to pay for expenses for both DFS and the counties.
Move the bill.
Moved by Clifford. Seconded by Duncan. Or that committee, we have a bill on the table. I would be open to any suggestions on how to reword it or amend it. I'm just guessing we may need a greater thought process over the next week. Yes, Representative Duncan, go ahead.
Thank you. I have a simple amendment that obviously we need more work, but maybe this simple one will help me from you guys if we need more. But on page 3, line 4, state treasurer, delete that and put in Department of Family Services. And then again on line 9, after the Department of Family Services and strike out State Treasurer.
Okay, is there a second? Seconded by Blackburn.
So the thought, Mr. Chairman, the thought behind this is, as I read through it, this takes the administration part off of the treasurer for dispersing the funds and puts it into the Department of Family Services. That's all it does. And so the details and everything else we'd have to figure out, but that would keep our bill alive, I think, and move forward. And then we'd have to work on it, I guess.
I'd say it's a darn good start. Representative Air.
Unmute me. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Could it also be a friendly amendment on page 2, line 22 to strike by the state treasurer?
Mr. Chairman?
Yep, go ahead, Representative Duncans.
That's not friendly, sorry.
Okay.
Because the state treasurer in that part, that's exactly what I was asking or referring to, is that the Department of Treasury collects all these fees and funds from all these different entities and different groups, and then they actually invest them and everything else. I originally was going to scratch that out, but after hearing their response, that doesn't work. So they will receive it just like they do everything else, Department Ag and everything else, and invest it, whatever. It's the disbursement and the distribution that was the issue.
And yeah, I think either way, you take out state treasurer, it's going to happen. The internal mechanisms of how it happens, you leave it in, it's going to happen. The internal mechanisms through wolves of how it happens. So, but if you don't think it's friendly, then we'll keep going. Further discussion on the amendment? Seeing none. All in favor of the amendment to take out the state treasurer? Yeah. Question, Representative Clifford? No, you're ready to vote already. Got it. All in favor of the amendment to take out the state treasurer and put it to DFS, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 9, 0. Congratulations, Department of Family Services. Any other amendments to the bill at this time? Representative Air.
Mr. Chairman, I'm not going to propose an amendment, but I just have a question. On page 1, line 13, each Board of County Commissioners shall provide for the burial. Now, at the end of that sentence, it does have the term or cremation. I wonder if we had to put or cremation in that first reference to burial there as well.
And so since you didn't say I move, and that's open for discussion.
I'll move it.
Is there a second? Seconded by Roscoe. I would say you heard about the indemnity provision other states put in, and I'm sure Jeremiah or Kyle could correct me if I'm wrong, but counties get a little worried about cremating people in case, next of kin is found. But if it's left up to the county, I certainly don't. Allowing them the option in certain cases that if they know someone wanted to be cremated or they left, let's say a suicide note or something, that they could choose to do so, I'm perfectly okay with. Discussion on that amendment, committee? Seeing no discussion, all in favor of the amendment to add burial or cremation on page 1, line 15, please raise your hand. I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. All right, that amendment passes. I think Kyle had his hand up, but I already moved on. All right, further amendments or discussion, committee? I don't think I can propose amendments as a chairman, but if anybody felt so inclined on page 3, I would delete on line 12 the word equal. I'm trying to think. And Department of Family Services receive. I'll find a way to take that out later. I'm not sure you want an equal percentage to counties and DFS if they're handling everything, but I'll go talk to people behind the scenes. So further discussion or amendments, committee?
Question.
Representative Blackburn.
Question on the bill.
Oh, all right. Question being called. Would the promise that your chairman will go dig and make this work by the time it gets to the floor. Ms. Nord, if you'd call the roll.
Mr. Chairman, this is a roll call vote for House Bill 29, burials for indigent persons, as amended. Representative Blackburn.
Aye.
Representative Clausen.
Aye.
Representative Clifford.
Aye.
Representative Duncan.
Aye.
Representative Ayer.
Aye.
Representative Hunt.
Aye.
Representative McGuire.
Aye.
Representative Roscoe.
Aye.
Chairman Zwaniter.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, this bill passes unanimously.
Yes. Another
I'm
one.
excited too, Representative Blackburn. That's 4 bills today that all pass unanimously. Does anybody want to floor manage this? I'm happy to do so unless someone feels so inclined. All right, well, I will go talk to the powers that be in the counties and DFS and some other vital records and make sure this is gonna fly, check with appropriations and see if we can get it all wrapped up by next week when it's committee of the whole. So with that committee, Representative McGuire, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'm sure that it's a moving target, but with your intuitive and experience, do you have any insight as to how things are going to progress in the next week, 2 weeks, and then hopefully if we meet in person in March?
I don't have any new information. I talked to the speaker this morning. We are on the same schedule. There is a difficulty that the House has the rule that we can accelerate a bill one day. The Senate does not have that rule. And so we could conceivably be through House bills much quicker than the Senate transfers over. I do know we have to approve the rules on that Monday, and we will have probably a committee meeting for the Senate files Monday, the 4th day of our virtual session. But the plan as of this morning is still to come back March 1st and do an in-person session. And there will be some discussion, I think, next week during the virtual session of mask mandates or staff awareness around those issues. And so we're going to have a discussion, I think, as a full body, at least in the House, on what we want the in-person session to look like. But that's, as of this morning, the session, the schedule for virtual and in-person is still on. As I mentioned, I think maybe before you got on, Representative McGuire, we will have another meeting in February for the redistricting committee, because Corporations Committee is also now the redistricting committee. So we'll have one meeting devoted to the census numbers, which I understand should be out by February 15th. And we can start doing some mapping on the technology and the tools on how we want the interim to look as we redistrict our legislative seats. Seeing no other business before us today, I'd just like to mention that we got all 4 of our bills done in 3 hours. That's what I remember from the Corporations Committee, is that we can jam out pretty quickly, especially with more experienced members. So I'm looking forward to an exciting interim with all of you on redistricting and Corp, and I'm super excited to be back. Happy Representative Ayer has agreed to be the vice chairman. And with that, I hope you all have a great rest of your day. Any parting words from LSO, Ms. Nord or Ms. Talbot? Any information we need to know before next week? Give it just a second to see if they jump on.
Mr. Chairman, I do not have any further information for the committee.
All right. Well, thank you for sticking with us today and the work you did as well, calling the roll and getting people lined up behind the scenes. So with that, committee, enjoy the rest of your Wednesday, and I look forward to seeing all of you next Wednesday virtually for our beginning of our session on day 2 of our session next Wednesday. Enjoy your day.